Hello, everyone, and welcome to Picture the Scene podcast, hosted by me, Andrew.
And me, Rachel.
Please note that this is a true crime podcast, so listener caution is advised. So, Rachel, winter is most definitely drawing in. It's cold. It's dark at 5 p.m. now, and it's getting harder to get out of bed. Now I've fully loaded up with fun, ready for this question. How are you? How's the last 2 weeks been?
Good, yeah. The weather's definitely taken a turn. There are things in my garden that don't belong to me. They're definitely parts of the neighbour's garden. But yeah, it's been good. The Christmas tree is up. I'm in full festive swing. Only good things happen in December. How about you?
I like that attitude. Yeah. We're not decorating this year, but that makes you sound like a Scrooge. But I'm good. I'm good. Life is always good.
You can't just drop in. We're not decorating this year without explaining why. Is that because
Oh, I
of the
can
big house
explain why.
move?
The problem is when I talk about my wife, she always tells me off. The issue is something not doesn't make it sound nice. But like last year, like I love decorations, but I've never really been a Christmas person. I remember my mum telling me off because she used to have to wake me up on Christmas Day to open my presents because I didn't want to get
Wow.
out of bed. And my wife loves the decorations, so I say to her, like, have what you want. I'll help you if you need me to help you, but it's your responsibility. So she loves putting them up and decorating, but what she doesn't love is taking them down. And last
Ah,
year she didn't end up taking them down to about February, and then the lights didn't come off the window until March. And we're supposed to be moving house next year, at the start of next year. So we decided it's probably wise that we just don't put them up.
I mean, that does make sense. But I will just caveat that probably half the nation kept some Christmas decks up, having gone straight from Christmas into probably the second or third lockdown last year. So I totally don't blame you on that front. But I agree, if you're moving in the new year, it's one extra thing to do. Just make sure that you look like you Christmas crapped all over your house next year, just to make up for it, okay?
Oh, I'm sure we will. I'm sure I won't have a choice in it. So yeah, it'll probably be like September we start doing it, I imagine, or something. And sorry, Nick, if you
Nice.
listen to this. So right, okay then. So before we do get into actually, let me start again. Are you ready for some true crime, Rach?
Absolutely.
Great. So before we do get into some true crime, and I do feel I'm inadvertently turning this into a regular thing, but Adam from UK True Crime has just celebrated 5 years of podcasting. I listen to him regularly, and if you don't, give him a try. You might like him. He said in his latest pod, well, it was the latest at the time I was writing this, that his first episode got 19 listeners, and now that same episode has over 400,000 listeners. So
Wow.
it gives me a little hope for our tiny podcast, Rachel.
Absolutely.
And it does make me smile. It does, however, make me smile that every week I'm telling people to go give someone a try when these pods get about 1 billion more listeners than we do. But, it's always the thought that counts, isn't it?
Yeah, what goes around comes around.
Exactly. And with that in mind, please do go subscribe and rate us. If you like us, that is, wherever you can. We'd be more than grateful. We'd actually be more grateful than Boris when he receives 2 free Peppa Pig world tickets. For you non-British people out there, don't Google that. We can always we can also be found at all the social medias. We're at ScenePod on Twitter and Instagram. That's at SCENEPOD, or you can find us on Facebook even by searching for Picture the Scene podcast. Now, I was inspired by Murder on My Street's episode about Mary Johnson to look into some UK stuff for today. So a shout out to Murder on My Street. I loved your pod on your episode of Mary Johnson, and it made me want to go and find out about the UK equivalent here. So thank you. And I just want to add a caveat here. I usually Google to make sure the content has not been covered, by a lot of other podcasts, but this time I haven't because I don't really care. The content matter jumped out at me, and so I wanted to talk about it. And I never
Ladies and
heard of.
gents, he's gone rogue.
I have gone rogue. Yes, you're right. I never actually heard about this case before, so if I haven't, I'm guessing other people haven't either. Get there, Rachel. So, if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like all of you listening to relax, to close your eyes and picture the scene. Today, we're going to take you back to the 28th of July 1993. We're in Crouch End, which is in the borough of Haringey, which is in North London, and it forms part of Greater London, and it's roughly 5 miles from the City of London. On this particular day, I want to take you to 7:40 a.m. in the morning, approximately. It's about 20 degrees Celsius, which is 68 Fahrenheit, with no wind whatsoever. It's a really nice summer morning, with temperatures getting ready to go as high as 29 degrees Celsius or 84 Fahrenheit, which is not too bad for the UK. It's a Wednesday morning, so while the kids will be sleeping and enjoying their school holidays, a lot of parents will be finishing, getting ready to go out for another day's work, or probably dreaming about the day finishing so they can enjoy a nice summer's evening. Now, I love days like this, not the going to work part, obviously, but knowing that it's going to be such a beautiful day and everything always just seems nicer and lighter. Everyone seems to be happier and dreams seem to be possible.
Nice. I feel like things like this when you're in the middle of summer, you don't have to be on holiday, you don't have to be abroad. You can wrap up work like an hour or two early, or earlier than you ordinarily would. You can get home whilst it's still daylight. And if you've got kids, get out with the kids, or just if you want to go for a drink or two with friends, you can, and you feel like you've got the best work-life balance. Kind of makes it bearable in the winter when you're leaving for work in the dark and getting home from work in the dark. Just longing for those long summer days.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree with you more there. So, I want to introduce you to Joy Gardner. Now, Joy Gardner was 40 years old at the time of her death. She was a mother. She was a mature student trying to better her life, not only for herself, but for her son that lived with her, Graham. And Graham was 5 years old. Now, Joy wasn't a criminal. I know I always start these off by talking about the criminal, but Joy wasn't a criminal. She wasn't even an unlikable person. Everyone that knew her described her as bringing into the lives of those that did know her the same thing that her name was, Joy. And this is why what happened to her is all the more saddening.
Just before we get into the serious stuff, I'm just going to add, you just don't hear about baby Grahams anymore, do you?
You don't hear about baby Grahams anymore.
You just don't. This is definitely placed, 20 plus years ago, because Graham is not a name that you hear of.
I bet you don't hear about baby Collins either, do you? But,
Baby Collins, no. Baby Roy.
Cool. And baby Roy, wow. But Graham, if it makes you any better, it's spelled Graeme, not Graham.
Oh,
Graham. So maybe
a modern twist on the name. I reckon
modern...
there'll be a lot of pets called Graham. I think like these kind of older names that are going way out of fashion are like getting recycled for like dogs and cats. Graham the cat. Just chilling out. Got a bit of attitude. Sorry.
I guess
got off on a complete tangent
that's
there.
Fine. I guess you're probably going to get old when you start hearing people calling their dogs Kylie then. When Kylie goes out of fashion.
Yeah, or Brittany.
Yeah. There we go. Next time I get a dog, I might call it Brittany.
There you go.
But going back to the
yes,
poor Graham, he was 5 years old at the time, and at 7:40 a.m. that morning, 5 men and 1 woman broke into Joy's home. They smashed open the door without warning. Startled, shocked, and scared Joy, they wrestled with her, trying to restrain her, all while her 5-year-old son was watching.
Oh my gosh.
They carried her into the living room, her living room. They bound her hands to her side with manacles attached to a leather belt that they put on her, akin to what you'd see on the old photographs of slave trading. They strapped her feet and her knees together with leather restraints, and they sat on her, causing life-threatening liver and kidney damage, and they possibly even stood on her, but that couldn't be fully proven. They used 13 feet's worth. That's 3.96 meters. That's almost twice the length of LeBron James. They used 13 feet's worth of tape to gag her, wrapping the tape around her head and her face. And at some point during all of this, her head was banged, at least once, maybe more, causing her brain to be damaged.
Oh my God.
I know. At
And
some
his
point,
son witnessed this whole thing.
yeah, most of it, yeah. Actually, yeah, exactly. At some point during this happening, one of the men noticed her son, Graham, or maybe they saw him to begin with, but they didn't really care, and they took him into the other room so he could no longer witness what was happening to his mum. But he could still hear them, and all of this was happening. I want to remind us here, all of this was happening in a social housing estate in one of the world's most populous cities, the capital city of England. And London is nicknamed the City of Dreams. But to a woman who had her own dreams, where was her protection? And where was the police? And I'm going to answer that question straight away. The police were those men who were there. Two of those men and a woman, they belonged to what was called a deportation squad, specifically assigned to detain and deport people who they deemed to be in the UK illegally. Two of these men were local police officers, and the final man was an immigration officer. So 5 men and 1 woman versus 1 single mother with no history of violence, no history of criminal activity, who was home alone with a 5-year-old son.
At 7:40 in the morning.
At 7:40 in the morning. Well, that's a popular police tactic in the UK. They always come.
It's like it's a drugs raid, though, isn't it? 5 people with all their restraints.
Yeah. Within minutes of Joy being restrained, and I did put restrained in inverted commas, and I do mean that in inverted commas because that wasn't restrained. That was way more than that. But Graham, her son, who could now only hear what was happening, he heard his mother's cry stop.
Oh, God.
One of the police officers realised that she was in difficulty and called for an ambulance. They took her to the hospital.
Too late there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit too late. They took her to the
You know
hospital.
what this reminds me of?
What?
George Floyd.
Yes, 20 years earlier, but yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
They took her to the
people in power. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's just people in power that are meant to protect and serve are actually the ones with the brutality, like abusing their positions.
Yeah, definitely.
And something that's been that they're researching now, as people's frames of mind when they're joining the police, because you've got people that want to be policemen and women because they want to yield that fear.
Yes.
And actually they should want the exact opposite, shouldn't they? They should want to just protect people and put criminals behind bar, not be angry at criminals, and I'm not saying Joy was a criminal, but not feel the need to provide justice for others, but just act within the law. But then situations like this and with George Floyd are absolute abuse of power and trust and authority. And luckily, well, I say luckily, not lucky at all, but there were video phones, in 2020 when this happened to George Floyd, but this woman was on her own, her son probably the only witness. And I'm sure you're going to tell us at some stage, but there's probably not. Well, there wouldn't be any body cameras, would there, on these
No, there would
police?
be no body cameras. But do you know what? I'm going off on a tangent, and I hope you listeners don't mind this. It doesn't really matter, Rachel. Do you know in
No.
50 years of reporting, one police officer who has been arrested and gone to trial has been convicted. Just one. The rest have been found not guilty or instructed by the judge to be dismissed. And that one person who got found guilty, this date is a couple of years old, so it may have changed over the last couple of years, but that one person who got found guilty was given a suspended sentence. There was
So he wasn't even punished.
no, there's a case, and I'm really sorry I can't remember the name, but there was a case of a guy in Hull. There was a black man in Hull. He was a paratrooper. He served his country. He fought for his country. He was arrested by the police. He died in police custody. I'm going off on a tangent here. He died in police custody. They had the police on CCTV. He was in difficulty for 10 minutes. They pulled his trousers around his ankles, and they stood there around him laughing as he died.
Oh my god.
He died. This was on CCTV in the police.
I think I remember this
in the
one.
police station. Yeah, none of them got found guilty of anything.
It's a joke.
Even the police investigation, one investigation, I can't remember which one now, found that there was at best like institutionalized racism going on.
Is that in the US?
That's at best.
In
No,
the UK?
that's in Hull, in Yorkshire.
Oh wow. Okay.
In the UK,
Wow.
the US crimes get more publicity. This happened.
Yeah.
I don't know about other countries, but this is not unique to America. This happened in the UK.
Absolutely awful, isn't it?
Like you say about police, I've said it for years. It unfortunately attracts a lot of the wrong type of people, bullies, and people who want the power, like you said. And it's a travesty.
I know I keep on mentioning this case, but I think it's just because it's so prominent. But look at that Sarah Everard case, right? That guy was not screened properly when he joined the police. He was then given a rank that required additional screening that was missed. Or like there were 3 opportunities that were lost to imprison that man or warn him and take him, strip him of his badge. All those opportunities were not taken because elements of the onboarding process were not complete properly. And then, like something like 48 hours before, it was reported that he was half naked driving around town.
Yeah.
But whoever was doing the admin in the police office just thought, I'll park that. I'll address it another day.
Yeah.
Like a matter of days before he escalated. So not only did the police not do their checks properly to onboard him, but then he was allowed to go and abuse his trust and take somebody off the streets, torture them, rape them, and then kill them.
Yeah, exactly.
And, put their family in a state of like shock and disrupt probably for the rest of their lives. And that is just a simple onboarding check, let alone people that are getting away with constant abuse of victims and criminals. And do you know what? People are in the jail cells, obviously done something wrong. Maybe not all of them. Maybe some of them are there by accident. But people are in jail. Yeah, they've done something wrong.
Yeah.
They still deserve humanity.
Of course. And the almost laughable thing about it is if you're a lollipop lady, if you're not in the UK, Google lollipop lady. It's basically a little old woman who helps children cross the road on the way to school. You have to get a police clearance for the check to do that now. So you have to go through the rigmarole of getting your criminal record checked, and it's normally like 60, 70-year-old women, aren't they? They're not.
Yep.
Retired.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not your normal predatory paedophiles.
No.
Yet you have to go through so many different checks to do that job. Yeah, you said, the I don't even know his name, but the guy who I don't even need to know his name. The guy who killed Sarah Everard was a police officer. Didn't get the checks.
Just missed them all. No, exactly. It's disgusting, isn't it?
Exactly. Let's go back to Joy because I could talk for a long time about this. So One of the police officers realised she was in difficulty, so he called for an ambulance and they took her to hospital and they put her straight into intensive care. She was unable to breathe by herself, and they officially announced her having died on the 1st of August 1993. But in reality, she had passed long before, probably, on her own living room floor. So how did it get to that point? Was Joy really one of these immigrants that have come here to take our jobs or sponge off the social welfare system that some tabloid newspapers would have you believe they do? And so let's have a look at her history, shall we? In 1987, 6 years before Joy arrived in the UK, she arrived on a visit visa, so she entered the country illegally, and the visa was valid for 6 months. She was pregnant at the time of her arrival, and she did overstay her original 6-month visa. She was technically classed as an overstayer. In September of 1990, she married a man called Joy Gardner, and her name changed from Berg to Gardner at that point. They started the application to be granted permanent residence for her, but shortly afterwards, the couple split, and John withdrew the application.
Oh,
Yeah, she was then advised by the police and the Home Office in October of that year of 1990, so the following month, to leave the country of her own accord or risk being deported. She didn't want to leave the country. So in December of 1990, bear in mind she was only advised at that point. So in December of 1990, she applied for a judicial review, which was subsequently turned down in April of the next year, 1991. A year after, so that was a year after the first advice was given her to leave. And in October of 1991, she was given notice that she would be deported, which she then appealed, which was her right to do so. That's why we have the rule of law. The appeal process came with several restrictions, including one which meant she had to report to a local police station regularly, informing them where she was living, among many other things. And she always did that. She did exactly what she was supposed to do. In April of 1992, her appeal was rejected, and she was subsequently interviewed by immigration officials again in June of 1992. And later on in that June, she reported to the police station and was informed that there would be a flight booked for her to leave the UK for Jamaica later on in the summer. Now, she didn't get on that flight, and she would later state that she never received notification of it. And her solicitor then appealed her deportation order, claiming compassionate circumstances. So it's also worth noting that even a local MP, so a local politician, Bernie Grant, was backing her appeal and requesting that she be allowed to stay. And
also, what trouble was she causing? Like you've already said, she's getting ready for work. Her kid's in education. You know, she's adding to the
her child was
economy.
born in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. What trouble is she causing being here? Like,
Her mother lived in the UK. Her mother was a legal UK citizen. Her brother and her sister were legal UK citizens. She
sounds like she was being singled out here.
Well, it's because she wasn't. So I wanted to paint that picture because it's important to be balanced, Rachel. And so yes, Joy overstayed her visa, but no, she wasn't an illegal immigrant. Now, she originally entered the country illegally. And yes, Joy did go through the proper process, appealing every time she got denied, because that was her right to do. That was in the rules. And she was always sticking to the rules. She never showed aggression once. No history of aggression or any indication of aggression. And yes, she did miss her flight home, but it's very plausible that she didn't receive a notification, because we know how the local governments work. It's just because they say they sent a letter to notify, doesn't mean they did. We'll never know. And her son was born in the UK. Like I said, her mother and her siblings were legal residents or citizens of the UK.
Yep.
But I want to talk about the deportation squad now. And I want to give them their official name, the Aliens Deportation Group. And even that name, it grates at me. And their whole existence was to accompany immigration officers as the immigration officer had no powers of arrest. and they only accompanied them where their violence was deemed probable by the person they were trying to deport. So that means that they already thought Joy was going to be violent. They went there with that mindset. And at no point did Joy show any form of violence or aggression.
No.
Where I would say it was in the UK, at no point did she not comply with restrictions put on her. Yet it was deemed violence was probable. And I also want to add, they arrived at her residence with knowledge her latest appeal had been turned down, and a flight was booked for 3 p.m. that day to take her to Jamaica. And they had orders to detain and remove her. And it's important that they knew that her latest appeal had been turned down. And why it's important, because they were the only ones that knew. 3 hours after they had detained her, her solicitor was given notice that her appeal failed. 3 hours after. And it's important, firstly.
And she was already dead by this point.
Yeah. And it's important, firstly, because it means that Joy would have had no prior warning that she's going to get deported. So people breaking her door down in the morning, it would be a shock. She wouldn't be expecting it. And even if they declared who they were, and we don't know if it was taken in properly by a shocked and distraught Joy. And this is also important because subsequently, and the government admitted this, so this is not like hearsay, the government later admitted that the letters were intentionally held back from being given to Joy and her solicitor, and they were timed to arrive after her arrest, so she couldn't appeal again when she had the legal right to appeal. So the government intentionally, the immigration officers intentionally prevented what she was legally entitled to do so. So they went there knowing that they wanted to deport her, and knowing that she could have appealed, but she had no clue as to why they were there, because they had intentionally held it from her. And it's just, and the reason why some people are saying, yeah, but they would have notified her when they were knocking on the door. They wouldn't have banged. They wouldn't have just stormed in. It's worth noting. Well, I've just ignored the police officers' testimonies here, because I'll touch on a little bit where it was proven they was lying later. But they claimed that Joy was the most violent person they'd ever dealt with. A 40-year-old single mother who had never shown aggression or violence.
In front of her child as well.
Who had complied with every single thing put on her. Suddenly she became the most aggressive woman that the police had dealt with. And the alien deportation group, or whatever they were called, they were formed from officers that were the most highly trained and dealt with the most dangerous incidents. Yet they were stating that she was the most dangerous person they'd ever dealt with. It's excuse my French here, but it's just complete bullshit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Exactly. So now I want to talk about those restraints. Now, they were akin to restraints you'd see when slavery was common practice. 9 days after Joy died, the Metropolitan, well, I can't say it, the Met Police in London, they had a report in which they themselves described, and I'm going to quote this, the restraints as uncivilized and de facto dangerous police techniques. They described it themselves. And the report from the actual police, it actually revealed that the gagging of suspects, and bear in mind, they put 4 meters of tape around her face, and they actually had to use 2 rolls of tape. They ran out, and because a roll of tape is 2 meters, so they had to get another one to roll around her face. The police report actually revealed that the gagging of suspects was against their own advice. The police's own legal team had advised since 1983, so 10 years before Joy's death, not to do it, with the exception of one instance on board their plane, in where the pilot deemed it was such a security risk that it was needed, but only then. So for 10 years, the police had advice not to do this. and they did this. And also, actually, there was never any training given on how to use these things. It was done on the job training. So police officers learned by watching what other ones did. And obviously, it's just
You think,
ridiculous.
just to put into context though, and just to take it back, you think that one of five of those individuals that day would have said, "Hang on, like what you're doing is inappropriate." Like there weren't two people, there weren't three people. Nobody was. One of five could have surely overridden the overarching like attack on that woman that day and gone, I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm going to call my superior, or I'm going to protect the boy, or I'm going to shout for help because what you're doing, what you other four people are doing, is grossly inappropriate.
No, it's well, the reason why they didn't, because they did it all the time, Rachel. And
It's horrible. It's
this was
just
common
awful.
practice. They went in there knowing they was going to do this.
Do you reckon
Um,
whistleblowing was in existence in '93?
no, people would have been too scared. Um, so this report that the police produced themselves after Joy's death, the police were obviously fearing what was in this report because they held on to it for a further 8 days, despite the government, the actual government, the people that run this country, they kept repeatedly requesting the police for it, and they wouldn't give it over. And they only gave it over basically when the government threatened them. And when the government did get it, neither the government nor the police would release details to the public about it. It was only Joy's family themselves that released the details into public domain, and they couldn't actually do that until 1994 and parts of 1995. So up to 2 years afterwards. The report showed that the government knew the truth about what happened to Joy on the same day. So they knew what happened to Joy on the same day when they claimed in a press release that Joy was violent, so she was restrained by the officers, but then she became subdued and unconscious. And I'm actually quoting from the press release of that day. And they said that even though they had the report, they said no reason to believe that unreasonable force was used at any time during the restraint. And so, again, I'm quoting here because this is what the report said about the tape that used to gag Joy. All 13 feet or almost 4 meters of it, and this is from the police report. The 2-inch wide tape is twisted to form a strong, soft rope-like strand. The twisted strand is placed in the mouth between the teeth. As it leaves the mouth, the tape is used flat and untwisted and taken around the back of the head, sticking to the cheek and the hair. As the tape comes back around to the front of the head, the flat, untwisted tape is struck across the chin and lower lip and the cheek. The tape is pulled quite taut in the application. So, like, this is in the police's own report, and this is what the report also had to say about the leather belt and the leg and feet restraints. A broad leather belt which buckles at the rear with 2 stout chain rings, handcuffs attached, and the 2 leather leg restraints that are simply used like luggage straps and bind the legs together at the ankles and the knees. And it went on to say this. It is fair to say that the equipment, especially the waist belt and the mouth restraint, look uncivilized and not in keeping with most modern police equipment. And finally, it also said this. It is felt that a jury or judge would never approve the mouth restraint and would be slow to approve the use of the body belt outside the aircraft, save in the most exceptional circumstances. So that is from the own report of the police. And the reason why I'm going to throw this in here, the reason why I haven't listened or said what the police said, because at one point the police woman, after Joy had been restrained, was lying across Joy's body.
Oh
And
my
the other
god.
police, the reason why one of the police officers said he put so much tape around her mouth and why there was so much violence, he said that even when the tape was around her mouth, she was moving her hands up to try and take it off. And
Oh my
how can a
gosh.
woman who's restrained with a leather belt around her waist that has handcuffs attached to it, so her arms are basically against her body, pull her hand up to her face with a woman lying across the top of her to pull the tape off her face? It's just complete and utter rubbish. It didn't help by the papers at the time describing her as basically being a violent criminal. It's just ridiculous, Rachel.
Yeah, well, it's the Sun and the Lake's finest reporting, isn't it?
Yes, and the government would later actually go on to ban the use of gags by the police, unsurprisingly. So 3 of the officers stood trial for manslaughter. A Detective Sergeant Linda Evans, who I just spoke about, a Detective Constable John Burrell, and a Detective Constable Colin Whitby. So not even all of them stood trial. Evans and Whitby were found not guilty of manslaughter, and Burrell was cleared on orders of the judge. The defense teams argued that the head injury caused during Joy resisting led to her death, not the gagging. And Joy officially
So
died.
basically
Yeah,
blaming herself.
yeah, because she was too violent, apparently.
Oh my
So,
God.
yeah, Joy.
Even in death, that's absolutely
I know.
disgusting.
Joy officially died from cerebral hypoxia. The prosecution argued that it was a cause of suffocation from the gag. The defense argued it was a cause of the head injury. 2 independent neuropathologists dismissed the head injury as causing the hypoxia. 2 independent neuropathologists, 2 people that have trained for years to specialize in that area, dismissed head injury as causing the hypoxia. They were found not guilty of manslaughter. And that's it, they were found not guilty.
Sounds like the judge had made his mind up anyway, or the jury.
Well, yeah, the judge told the jury, for one of them, what was her name? Burrell. The judge told the jury to find him not guilty.
Oh my God.
And and I try not to give my opinion, but I'm going to give my opinion here. They arrived at a door, and in my opinion, they arrived at a door to deport her, removing her of her right to appeal. They arrived, 6 of them, expecting violence with restraints. Restraints that for 10 years had been deemed likely not to be legal by the police themselves, but they used them anyway. Now, if you turn up expecting violence with those restraints, and the first thing you're going to do is be heavy-handed. You're going to try and restrain as quickly as possible. Joy had no history of being aggressive. She had no history of violence. She didn't have a single complaint against her. Now, I want to wrap up with 2 quotes from Joy's mother, who has been campaigning, bless her, she's quite old now, on her daughter's behalf for over 28 years now. Paul Condon said it was not about race. This is Joy's mother talking here. Well, I say, how many white women have done that? Have they done that too? She says.
Yeah.
Look at Rhodes West and look at what she did, but they still treated her as a human being. They didn't go into her house, truss her up and kill her. What they did to Joy was terrible, terrible. I just keep asking, why? Now, Paul Condon was the head of the Metropolitan Met Police at the time. And I just want to give you one last quote from Joy's mum. When we die, it should be because it is our time to die, not because we are brutally killed by the people who should be looking after us. And I think that says it all. What are your thoughts about that case?
That's just heart-wrenching, isn't it? Like, I mean, take away the fact that I have so many questions about the 5-year-old boy, right? I'm sure I can't do math that quick. Maybe he might
He's 33
be 4.
now.
Right,
Sorry?
33.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to live with him, right? It's going to give him, if he stayed in the city, major complex trust issues, like, and being without parent, because I don't know whether she married the dad or whether the dad was back in the in her hometown before she moved to the UK. I'm not quite sure, but he's been left essentially without a parent to look
Yeah.
after him, and just with the scars. I mean, I know what my daughter picks up now at 5 is everything. Like she doesn't forget anything, let alone something really awful happening to me in front of her. But then add to the fact this woman, like, regardless of whether or not you or our listeners might think she's a criminal because she was in the country and she was asked to leave, right? Take that away. She did not deserve to be at 7:40 in the morning, um, kind of broken into and thrust upon like that, but then B, bound and gagged like that, and then C, sat on, stamped, whatever else it was. There were like tiers of that that just were not necessary. If somebody
Yeah.
had come in, cuffed her, taken her to the police station, put her in a cell for 6 hours, got the notice, served the notice, put her on a plane, that in itself would have been awful. But what happened is I can't comprehend it. It's disgusting,
It is
and
disgusting.
it is pure. Um, these 5 individuals have just taken an opportunity to force the law in the most brutal way on a helpless individual.
Exactly. You can actually see. I'll put lots of links up in the sources, and one of them is a documentary on all four. We can see the police going into the courts, and like they're smiling as they go in,
Smiling, yeah,
and joking.
and this is the thing. Like, did they keep their jobs? They better not have kept their
Yeah, they kept their
jobs.
jobs. There was no internal punishment for this. It was deemed that they did exactly what was right.
It's just It's just disgusting. I
Yeah,
mean, I know it's completely unrelated, but remember when the police had the opportunity to help the footballers at Hillsborough, the football fans, sorry, not the
yeah,
footballers, and instead they let the newspapers run the story that the fans caused the chaos
themselves.
that
Yeah,
led to the 96 people, now 97, passing away. Like, the police did not stand up for what was right. They let the papers run the story that accused essentially Liverpool football fans of just being hooligans.
yeah, exactly, exactly, Rachel. I want to actually give you some facts now. I only got these earlier, but I just want to read them out because the reason I wanted to do this because I've been in so many conversations over the years with people, and people always say to me, "Racism doesn't exist." When people talk about incidents like these, they're one-offs and it's because of the people involved. There's no institutionalized racism. Now, I want to give you a few facts here that I've looked up because I know there'll be people listening to this or probably already turned off way earlier because saying, "Oh, they're just he's like a lefty and he's too soft. He's too one-sided." So I thought I'm going to give some actual facts here. Black people account for 3% of the population in the UK, but they account for 8% of the deaths in custody. That's disproportionate. Now, the government in 2017, they launched an inquiry into the handling and institutionalized racism in the police. The government's own report, so these are figures that I'm quoting from the government here, their own report found that the colour of your skin has a measurable impact on how you're treated at every stage in the justice system. There's
Oh
been
my God.
there has been a multi-government, so not just like it's not just Boris Johnson's fault. There's been a multi-government public approach that young offenders be jailed less and treated more to try and stop them becoming repeat offenders. Okay, so I want to give you some facts around that. In 2006, 25% of young prisoners were BAME, so that's black, Asian, or minority ethnicity. In 2020, after 14 years of this government approach to not jail offenders, young offenders as much, that figure rose by 16%. 41% of young prisoners were Black, Asian, or minority ethnicity. How is that imprisoning less young people? That sounds like it's just imprisoning less young white people. Now, between April 2018 and March 2019, this again is all not from the same report, but these are from figures taken from the police. Between April 8, 2018 and March 2019, for every 1,000 white people in the population in England, there was 4 stop and searches of white people. Now, at the same time range, for every 1,000 black people in the UK, there was 38 stop and searches of black people. So that's almost 10 times as much. Now, BAME, so Black, Asian, or minority ethnicity defendants, they were more likely to receive prison sentence for drug offences, even when previous convictions were taken into account. Now, research by the Sentencing Council of the UK, these people research into sentences given to prisoners, it showed that if you are from a minority, the odds of your ethnicity contributing to your sentencing decision will be between 40 and 50% higher than if you was white. Now, the government's report that I mentioned earlier proved, and this is from their report, in effect, that if you had a white man and a black man, or an Asian or minority ethnicity, compared to a white man, with the same history, with the same evidence against them, or similar evidence, the Black, Asian, or minority ethnicity person would be more likely to be stopped by the police, arrested, charged, denied bail, convicted, and then sentenced to prison. But it doesn't even stop there. It also showed, that same report, that while in prison, the same man would be less likely to be given support and a chance of rehabilitation, so would therefore be more likely to reoffend. And if he was, and he would be more likely to die in police custody. But if he was to die in police custody, his family would be less likely to get justice. And this is all from the government report.
It shouldn't even be on the table for discussion or debate, this.
And do you know what's changed since then?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing, apart from politicians saying a few things. But absolutely nothing has changed.
I remember in a previous job we did, we were working with a local team about raising awareness of people of colour and the work and even books, and instilling it in young children that it's okay to talk about race and it's okay to be curious, because if you're curious, you can be educated, and if you're educated, you're more likely to be understanding and empathize and, you know, share care, instead of growing up with this view of, you know, just no one talks about race, and don't mention don't mention anything inappropriate, that kind of thing. And we were chatting about our education, right? So there was myself and a couple of other people that had grown up where we live, and there were 2 people from the group, the people of colour, who were our age, and were one was Asian and one was black, and they were both taught at 7 what they needed to do in the event they were stopped by law enforcement. Yeah, what they needed to do, how they needed to behave, what they were to say, you know, at 7, right? The conversations that my mum and dad were having with me at 7 were, you better be home at 7 p.m. or I'll be calling the cops, right?
Yeah,
Very different attitude towards from such a young age. These children are taught, mind your manners. All kids should be taught that, obviously, but specifically, do not talk back to the police. Do not move your hands. If you're asked to be, to remain still, you put your hands in the air and you remain there. You do as you're told. Everything. Could you imagine being sat down and taught that at the age of 7?
it still sphere, doesn't it? It's
Oh,
ridiculous.
massively.
I,
And then you grow up thinking it's not fair. It's not fair. Like my pals don't have these kind of worries that I have. And like it's so awful. It's like it's just really unnecessary in this day and age. I mean, I
it
don't
is.
know whether you're a big follower of football, but when England played and in the final and they got, they didn't make it. Obviously, they didn't win the trophy on penalties, and there's 3 individuals who were subjected to awful racism. There were a team of 11 men on that pitch that day, yeah, and
Yeah,
men, 3 grown men, one man of which not a massive United fan. However, he has helped put food on the table for thousands of children during COVID when he could have just carried on doing his own thing, right? And yet he is abused by grown men and women in a sport that's meant to bring people together, not tear people apart. Just
exactly.
disgusting.
It's disgusting. And I believe in the rule of law, Rachel. And that basically, in a nutshell, for people who may be thinking what's he talking about, that basically in a nutshell is I believe that everybody should follow whatever the law says. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what colour, ethnicity, gender, or anything. And but what I also and if the law is not right, then you change the law properly. But I also believe in is that rule of law should be applied to everyone equally,
Mm.
and that's just it's not happening.
You know what?
And just sorry, just and one person who did believe in the rule of law was Joy's mom. She's a wonderful woman. If you can read more about her online, she was saying that before this happened, she didn't believe it could happen.
No.
When it did happen, and there's video interviews of her saying this, so you can find them online. When it did happen, she's quoted many times saying, "I have faith that the police officers will be brought to justice,
Yeah.
that they'll be punished for what they did," and
She
it
still
didn't
didn't give
happen.
up.
Yeah, for 28 years since it happened, she's been campaigning for um, for justice for her
I
daughter.
wonder whether I wonder whether she took Graham on.
She did. She took him on, and he talked about
Oh.
his. He talked about his how it affected him. Again, the interviews with her saying that he was in therapy. He was blaming himself. He was asking. He was wondering. He was questioning why he couldn't protect his mum.
You'd be scared of the front door
Yeah,
going for the
there's
rest of
all
your life, wouldn't you?
exactly. There's also an article out there by his ex, either wife or girlfriend, when obviously he's an adult and he's got a kid
Mm.
with her, and she's saying that she moved near to where his mum's flat was, and she only found out when he came out to her house and he said to her, like, that's where my mum died, and she had to move away. And she even says in the article, because the article was about Joy and justice for Joy,
Mm.
and she even said in the article that she believes the reason why they didn't stay together was because how that affected him. So
It's
then
just
that has a
awful.
knock-on effect on his family.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, it never brings people back, but you sleep a bit more soundly and safely knowing that killers are brought to justice, right?
Yeah,
And
but
these
you
five
believe in the rule of
individuals,
law. If it
yeah,
happens, then they should be punished.
yeah, these people were just out in the streets. God knows what Joy's mum must have thought, thinking that they could go and do that. again,
Exactly.
just awful.
I'm just going to wrap up, Rachel. We've been talking
Yeah,
for a long time.
yeah,
Before I do wrap up, I just again want to thank Murder on My Street. Give them a listen. If it wouldn't be for them, I probably would never even approach a subject like this, and it needs speaking about. So thank you. But for one last time, I'd like you to relax, to close your eyes and picture the scene. It's early on a summer morning, and your mum is feeding you and getting you ready for the day ahead. Your mum is your hero. Your mum is your protector. When 6 people come crashing in your home, your safe space, you then have to watch and subsequently listen as they take her life. What would you do? So, thank you all, and God bless.